I've lived long enough to know that some stories should have stayed buried. But the older you get, the harder it becomes to sleep with ghosts whispering in your ear. I don't expect you to believe me. Hell, if I hadn't been there myself, I wouldn't believe a damn word either. You've heard about the Cold War, right? The nukes, the spies, the propaganda, all that. But there's something they never told you. Something that didn't fit in the textbooks or the documentaries. Because it wasn't just a war between nations. It was a war between us and something else. My name doesn't matter anymore. The Air Force stripped it from the records decades ago. But I was a pilot. B-52 Stratofortress. Tail number I still remember like a scar. 6049. I flew missions that never appeared on any map. We call them ghost flights. The brass called it national security. I called it something else. Damnation with wings. This, what you're hearing right now, isn't for fame or forgiveness. I've got no family left to protect. No medals that mean a damn thing. I just want the truth out before I go. They told us to forget it. But how do you forget a night when the sky itself screamed? It was January 1962, Northern Airspace. Officially, there was nothing up there except snow and silence. But our instruments told a different story. Something was moving fast, too fast for Soviet tech, too erratic for weather. We were ordered to intercept, not question. The last thing my co-pilot said before we lost comms was, "That ain't a plane, Cap." That's alive. I've replayed that moment every night for 60 years. The hum of the engines, the static in my headset, the way the horizon folded on itself like a torn photograph. Whatever we encountered that night, whatever we dropped, it was never meant for human eyes. I kept quiet because they made sure I did. Men in suits. No insignias, no names. They showed up the next morning and erased everything. Our logs, our tapes, even our flight plans. One of them leaned close and said, "You didn't fly last night, Captain. You dreamed it. But dreams don't leave burn marks on your skin." You're probably wondering why I'm talking now, after all these years. Let's just say I'm running out of time. And lately, the same men who told me to forget have started watching me again. Maybe they know I've decided to talk. Maybe they're listening right now. Doesn't matter. I'm tired of being afraid. There's a file in my desk drawer, labeled Aurora. Top secret. I wasn't supposed to keep it, but I did. Inside, there's a photo. Black and white. Faded. But if you look close enough, you can see the outline of something behind our bomber. It's not another aircraft. And it's not a cloud. When I tell you what it was, what it really was, you'll understand why they buried it. And why they'll try to bury me next. I joined the Air Force when I was 21. Back then, flying meant freedom. My father had fought in the Pacific, came home with half his hearing gone, and a chest full of medals he never talked about. I guess I wanted to understand what drove a man to go through hell and still salute the flag. The recruiters sold us dreams of the sky, clean, endless, beautiful. But by the time I made captain, I learned that the higher you fly, the dirtier the secrets get. My crew and I were good. Not heroes, not saints, just men who did what we were told and prayed the orders made sense. We'd flown nuclear drills, high-altitude runs, recon over the Arctic. Nothing ever rattled us. Not until that winter. The Cold War had turned colder than ever, and command was whispering about something new, something beyond deterrence. It started with a phone call I wasn't supposed to get. 2 rings after midnight. No name on the line, just a voice I didn't recognize. He said, "Captain, pack for the north. You've been reassigned. This is classified Echo 7 clearance." Then he hung up. No orders, no briefing. Just coordinates in Alaska and a one-way ticket marked confidential transport. When I got there, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the kind you find in nature. This was heavier, like the whole place was holding its breath. A snowstorm was building over the hangars, the wind slicing through the metal like it wanted in. Men in black coats moved around the tarmac, faces hidden under hoods. No patches, no flags. Just a single emblem painted on the side of the main building. A circle with a line through it, like an I crossed out. I've been stationed in secret bases before, but this one felt different. There were no insignias on the planes, no official paperwork, nothing that said U.S. Air Force. The hangar lights flickered like they were powered by something not quite meant for this world. They took my ID, my sidearm, even my dog tags. I asked one of the guards, "Who exactly are we working for here?" He just stared at me and said, "You'll find out in the air." They put us up in a small, windowless barracks. Concrete walls, a single red light in the hallway that never turned off. My crew was already there. Taylor, my co-pilot, who never shut up about baseball. Gomez, our navigator. And O'Reilly, the tail gunner, the kind of man who'd laugh at a hurricane. We'd been through enough missions together to know when something didn't smell right. This time, the stench was everywhere. We weren't allowed to talk about what we saw. Hell, we weren't even allowed to write letters home. Every word, every breath felt monitored. One night, Taylor whispered, "Cap, you ever get the feeling we're not fighting Russians anymore?" I told him to shut up before someone heard. But deep down, I was thinking the same thing. The first briefing came 3 days later. A man walked in wearing a black uniform with no rank or name. Just that same crossed-out I symbol stitched on the sleeve. He introduced himself only as Commander Hayes. His voice was calm, too calm, like he'd practiced every word. He said we were part of Operation Aurora, a mission so classified it didn't exist on paper. Our orders were simple. Fly north, maintain radio silence, and deliver a payload to a set of coordinates over the Arctic Circle. I raised my hand, asked what kind of payload. Hayes looked at me for a long time, then said, "It's not your concern, Captain. Your job is to drop it. That's all." We'd flown nuclear drills before, but this was different. The weight of what he didn't say hung in the air heavier than any bomb. That night, I couldn't sleep. The barracks creaked with the wind, and somewhere down the hall, I heard footsteps slow, deliberate, stopping right outside my door. A shadow lingered under the frame for a moment, then moved on. When I opened the door, there was no one there, but a note had been slid under it. Just one line, typed on a plain white slip: "Don't look at the sky when it opens." The next morning, Hayes told us the mission would launch at 0200. He gave us all black flight suits, no markings. The plane, our plane, had been modified. Extra panels, strange instruments wired into the cockpit, and a control unit we weren't allowed to touch. The engineers didn't talk. They just worked in silence, eyes hollow, hands trembling. When we boarded that night, the air inside the bomber felt electric, charged with something I couldn't explain. The engines purred like they were alive, but the vibration wasn't mechanical, it was deeper, resonating in our bones. Taylor cracked a joke to ease the tension, but even he couldn't hide the fear in his voice. We were told to fly low and stay off radar. Gomez ran through the coordinates, straight north, deep into airspace that didn't officially exist. O'Reilly loaded the payload, sealed under layers of steel casing, no serial numbers. Whatever was inside, it wasn't a standard bomb. Before takeoff, I saw Hayes standing at the edge of the runway, watching us. No salute, no radio contact, just that blank stare. As we started to roll, the red lights along the runway blinked out, one by one, until there was only darkness ahead. I remember thinking, this isn't a mission. It's a burial. We lifted off at exactly 2:04 a.m. The storm was closing in, but the sky above the clouds glowed faintly, like dawn trying to break through the wrong side of the earth. At first, the instruments worked fine, but 50 miles north, the altimeter began to spin. The compass started to twitch. Gomez cursed under his breath. Taylor tapped the dials and said, "We're losing it, Cap." Then the radio crackled, just static at first, then a voice, faint, mechanical. Not command, not human. It repeated a single phrase over and over, distorted by interference. "Altitude breach. Maintain course. Do not observe." I tried to respond, but the mic was dead. The engines began to hum at a different pitch, almost harmonic, like they were echoing the voice. Outside the windshield, the Aurora Borealis flared to life, brighter than I'd ever seen. But it wasn't green this time. It was violet, pulsing, moving like it was alive. Taylor said, "Jesus Christ, it's following us." And then, something passed beneath us. No radar return, no signal, just a shadow, so big it blotted out the reflection of the moon. That's when I realized we weren't the only ones in the sky that night. We flew into that violet light, like men walking into a chapel no one else believed existed. For a minute, all sense of scale went to hell. The Aurora crawled up from the horizon and wrapped around the plane, crawling along the fuselage like cold fire. The instruments went from unreliable to outright treacherous. The artificial horizon jittered, the gyro spun like a top with a broken tooth, and every gauge began to sing in a key I couldn't place. Gomez leaned forward, eyes wide, muttering coordinates like a prayer. He kept saying, "No return, no return." I didn't know if he meant the plane or us. Then the light shifted and something moved inside it. At first I thought it was another plane, some Soviet contraption we hadn't been briefed on, but it lacked wings, tail, any of the geometry we relied on to call something an aircraft. It was like a silhouette of negative space, an absence shaped into a form that made your stomach drop. It hovered below us, and then rose, and the world seemed to fold along its edges. The stars behind it blinked out, as if someone had flipped a switch. Taylor swore. O'Reilly swore. I swore, though I don't remember the words. The crew started checking systems like trained automata. We were pilots, not priests, but in that instant I wanted absolution. Gomez radioed the nearest relay, voice thin as paper. Unknown contact at 2 o'clock, bearing 030. No visual signature on radar. The reply was immediate. Cut to static, then a voice, Hayes again, impossibly calm, instructing in a tone that brooked no argument. "Maintain altitude. Do not deviate. Do not attempt to illuminate. Do not observe," he said. Same words we'd heard before, but now they came as an order from someone who could ruin you with a signature and a stamp. "Do not observe?" Taylor scoffed. "Sir, whatever that is, you don't get to ask questions." His jaw worked. He was so young, and he was beginning to sound old. I did what I'd been trained to do. I kept the nose steady and kept the plane between my hands like a thing that could still be trusted. But trust is a brittle thing at 35,000 feet when the universe decides to get strange. The shadow, if that's what you could call it, moved alongside us, matching our speed in a way no human pilot could. It occasionally pulsed, and when it pulsed, the whole plane seemed to breathe in. Then the payload bay light came on down in the belly, the way it should have when you were preparing to drop ordnance. Only this time the bay door didn't look like a door. It looked like a throat, a curved plate that shone with a metal that reflected nothing. The casing they'd strapped to our racks, the unmarked, welded thing, hummed like a trapped insect. I could feel it through the floor, a low vibration that made my molars ache. O'Reilly's hands were white around the handle. Gomez shoved a printout at me. "These coordinates are wrong," he said. "The map shows open ice. This shows a point in the middle of nowhere, labeled in Cyrillic and then in a script I don't recognize. There's a symbol next to it, the same crossed I." He swallowed. "There's a second notation. It reads, containment not guaranteed. Containment not guaranteed." I read it 3 times like a litany until the words meant nothing and everything at once. We were told to release at the mark. Release the payload. The manual procedures played out in my head from training. Checklist, callouts, confirmation. But this wasn't a standard procedure. The controls wired into our console didn't reply to normal inputs. The engineers had installed a panel wrapped in glass, and there was a keyed switch with no label. Taylor glanced at me, and for the first time since we'd taken off, I saw the possibility of refusal in his face. Maybe I should have taken it. I flipped the switch. There was a motion in the belly that I can still hear when I close my eyes. A partition sliding, a hiss like the release of a hell breath, and then the payload began to descend. The indicators told me it was mechanical, falling away on rails. The faint blue glow from the bay pooled like spilled moonlight, and then snapped off. For the briefest second, the world felt balanced. The thing had been released into the black below, and the terrible shape that had been following us slowed as if to watch. Then the radio screamed. Not words, a sound. It was a shriek that wasn't made out of pressure waves alone. It gnawed at my bones. It was like metal tearing under a strain it was never made to take, but the sound had shape, 3 notes that climbed, impossible and arithmetic. Taylor put a hand to his ear as if he could smother it. O'Reilly vomited into a bag and didn't stop. The shadow, the presence below, reacted as if you had jabbed it. It pulsed in a pattern that synced with the sound, and a filament of light shot up, thin as a thread, and touched the belly of our bird like a cat testing a stranger's whisker. The fuselage shuddered. The altimeter spun wildly, and then, for a heartbeat, read negative altitude. The cockpit shook as if an invisible hand had tipped the plane forward. Gomez began to cry. He whispered, "It's talking." He wasn't joking. There was a voice then, over the static, not haze, not command. It was low at first, then it uncoiled into language that didn't match any syntax we'd been taught to recognize. It passed into English, as if it had tried on our sounds like a stolen uniform. The words it chose were not words but meanings. Hunger, surface, between, open. When it formed phrases, I remember them because they cut like a surgeon's blade. "We are not of your sky. You are the intruder. Relinquish." I could have turned back. In my head I ran through 1,000 versions of cowardice and bravery. What we were doing was wrong, on many levels. We were trespassing in a pocket of the world no one had authorized us to enter. But there are 2 forces in a pilot's life, duty and momentum. That night, momentum won. We were in motion. We had people outside who expected us to do the deed. We had men in black who would not tolerate deviation. The plane's skin started to look wrong. Reflections on the gauges seemed delayed. A rivet on the wing looked like it was breathing. I thought, irrationally, about my father's stories of islands that swallowed ships and men who returned with stories so bad they were never believed. I thought about my father's silence and how it had become my inheritance. At 30,000 feet, your mind plays games to keep you alive. It fabricates humor where there is none. A laugh then, a sound that was part hysteria, part defiance. "We dropped it," I said to no one. "We did what we were told." Taylor laughed too. And for a moment, the 4 of us were boys again in a cramped shack down on base, not men carrying something monstrous across the ice. Then something hard struck the port wing. Not like a collision, like a correction. The plane yacht. The autopilot kicked in, then failed. Lights winked out across the panel. An instrument burst and a smell filled the cockpit, metallic and sweet. Taylor slid from his seat as if pushed by a force I couldn't see. He hit the console and didn't move. "O'Reilly!" I screamed. He lunged for him, hands slipping on sweat-slick surfaces. The overhead emergency lamp blinked once, twice, then went steady. In the dim red light, Taylor's face was slack, eyes wide and unseeing. His lips moved, forming a phrase I couldn't hear, not a word of any language I knew. I reached for a med kit like a man, performing a ritual I didn't believe would work. Gomez was shaking so badly his hands were unusable. O'Reilly was a man made small, bargaining with the sky. I slotted in 4 with hands that refused to obey me. Taylor's pulse was racing then, too fast, a drumbeat that skipped and stumbled. He tore at the band, pulled his mask off, and stared at me with an expression that would haunt me for 50 years. Pure, unfiltered panic. "Do you remember the note?" he asked between gasps. "Don't look when it opens." His voice cut off in a sound like metal grinding. I looked at him, and I failed him. I had to do something. I had to act. So I gave an order, straight and clear. "Get us home. Now." My voice sounded small in the cavern of the cockpit. The plane responded as if it had chosen to obey. The engines took a bite, the nose rose, and we began to turn south. But the sky had other plans. The violet light thickened, closing ranks like fists. The shadow below elongated, and then, with a motion too quick to track, it jumped. It leaped toward us like a predator closing the last meters. For the first time, I felt true fear, the kind that isn't about dying, but about being observed by something that doesn't think of our terms. The plane shuddered as a line of light lanced across the windshield. It seared a ribbon across the glass, and through that cut, I saw something that will never leave me. A shape not designed to be seen by human eyes, angles that couldn't exist in Euclidean space, an aperture that knew how to look without being a thing of sight. It looked at us, and we were seen, not as threats, and not as curiosities, but as resources, as vessels. Taylor's hand flew to his throat. He clawed at the air. Blood beaded at his lip. He was dying in a way that had nothing to do with trauma, and everything to do with having been made to understand a truth too big for a man to hold. I grabbed the yoke, and I screamed at the sky to leave us alone. The word I used wasn't prayer, it was a demand. We were small, but we were fighters. We had been trained to refuse. That night, the universe taught us what refusal looks like, and we learned that sometimes, even the best training isn't enough. The next few seconds didn't belong to time. The cockpit was a storm of light and screaming metal, every alarm howling in perfect discord. The smell of ozone filled my lungs. The air felt charged, thick like syrup. I remember the way the yoke jerked in my hands as if someone else were flying with me, someone stronger, unseen. Engines 1 and 2 gone, Gomez shouted. His voice cracked under the static. The gauges for both engines were flatlining, fuel pressure dropping like a stone. I could feel the bomber tilting, heavy on the left, fighting against gravity's pull. O'Reilly yelled that the tail controls were sluggish, unresponsive. I couldn't tell if it was damage or if the air itself had stopped cooperating. Get us below the clouds, I barked. My words came out more like a plea than a command. I didn't know if descending would help, but altitude felt like exposure, as if that thing could see us better up here. The moment we cut power, the light faded behind us like it had lost interest. The sky went black again, utterly black, except for the ghostly shimmer of the Aurora retreating northward. For a moment, there was silence, the kind that rings in your bones. I looked over my shoulder. Taylor was still slumped in his seat, eyes half open, chest moving shallowly. He was alive, barely. I turned to Gomez. We're going home, I said. He nodded, tears freezing at the corners of his eyes. I tried the radio again. Command, this is 6049. We're aborting mission. Repeat, aborting mission. We've lost power and sustained damage. Request emergency clearance south vector. Static. Then a faint reply, a whisper under the noise. Continue course. Do not deviate. My blood ran cold. That isn't command, O'Reilly muttered. He was right, it wasn't. The voice had that same mechanical echo, the same lack of breath, like a tape loop trying to imitate humanity. I slammed the switch off. We were on our own. I leveled the wings and eased us down through the storm. I scraped the canopy. The altimeter spun, corrected, spun again. For a heartbeat, the stars returned. Faint, familiar pinpricks. And I remember thinking I'd never seen anything more beautiful. Then we broke through the clouds, and I realized beauty was just another lie. Below us stretched a wasteland of ice and darkness. But in the center of that frozen hell was a glow, a circle of light the color of bone, burning from beneath the ice. It pulsed slowly like a heartbeat. I couldn't tell how big it was. At that altitude, it could have been a mile across or the size of a small city. Cap, Gomez whispered, that's where we dropped it. My stomach turned. The glow brightened, throbbing in rhythm with the bomber's engines. Every pulse made the lights in the cockpit flicker. Taylor moaned, his voice thin and hollow. It's not done. I pushed the throttle, desperate to put distance between us and that thing, but the engines screamed in protest. One caught, sputtered, then died completely. The other held long enough to keep us gliding. The altimeter wound down, 8,000 feet, 6-4. Brace! I shouted. We're going in hot. The world hit us sideways. The impact wasn't the explosive end I expected. It was slower, a long tearing slide across ice and powder, the bomber carving its own grave. The noise was unbearable. Metal folding, glass shattering, the roar of wind becoming a howl. I remember seeing sparks arc across the instrument panel like tiny lightning bolts. When we finally stopped, the silence came again, deeper than before. Only the wind moved. I unbuckled and stumbled out of my seat, lungs burning from smoke and cold. Gomez was alive, bleeding from a cut above his eye. O'Reilly was shouting for help, his leg pinned under a twisted frame. Taylor wasn't moving anymore. I climbed out through the shattered canopy into a night so still it felt wrong. The air bit through my flight suit, but that wasn't what made me shiver. The glow from beneath the ice was stronger now, bleeding through cracks around the wreckage, outlining everything in pale light. The bomber's shadow stretched in impossible directions, like the geometry of the place had forgotten itself. Cap, Gomez called weakly, pointing toward the horizon. Something was moving out there, shapes, several of them, sliding under the ice. Not walking, not swimming, but sliding, as if the ground itself had turned liquid around them. I counted 3, maybe 4. Each time one shifted, the glow flared. O'Reilly started praying, his voice shaking. I didn't tell him to stop. Whatever faith he had left, he deserved to use it. I pulled him free, half dragging, half carrying him toward what was left of the fuselage for shelter. Inside, the radio sputtered to life on its own. No one touched it. The dial glowed, and that same monotone voice spoke again. Containment compromised. Retrieval inbound. Retrieval? Gomez echoed. From where? I didn't answer. I looked out through the broken hull. In the distance, through sheets of blowing snow, I saw lights, not from a rescue team, not from any aircraft I knew. They were too low, moving too smoothly, forming a perfect triangle that hovered in silence. Every instinct I had screamed that those weren't ours. I thought about firing a flare, but what good would it do? If they wanted us found, we'd be found. If not, we'd be erased. I told the men to stay quiet. The lights drew closer until they hovered, maybe 200 yards out, suspended above the ice. Then the wind stopped. Completely. The sound died, like the world had been muted. A beam of white light swept across the wreck. It wasn't bright. It was heavy, like it had weight. When it touched the bomber, the metal began to hum, vibrating with a low resonance that I could feel in my teeth. Gomez screamed. O'Reilly covered his ears. I couldn't move. The light passed over me, and for a split second I saw inside it, saw shapes moving within the beam itself, silhouettes bending in ways human joints couldn't. Then the beam snapped off. The lights rose, slow and deliberate, and disappeared into the clouds. We waited a long time before we spoke again. What now, Cap? O'Reilly asked. His voice was hoarse, broken. Now we survive, I said, though I wasn't sure how. We scavenged what we could. Rations, flares, a working flashlight. The temperature was dropping fast. The glow beneath the ice was dimming, but not gone. I had the sense that whatever we dropped was still active or alive. Hours later, I saw headlights cutting through the snow, trucks, black ones, no insignias. Men climbed out wearing white suits, masks covering their faces. They moved like they knew exactly where we were, exactly what had happened. One of them raised a megaphone and said, Captain, step away from the wreckage. I wanted to ask how he knew my rank. I wanted to ask 100 things. But exhaustion does strange things to courage. I did as I was told. They herded us into one of the trucks. I remember the hiss of oxygen, the smell of disinfectant, the hum of machinery. Someone pressed a needle into my arm. The world began to blur, and the last thing I saw through the window was the bomber being swallowed by snow. And beneath it, that pale light still pulsing, slower now, like a dying heart. I woke up 3 days later in a hospital bed that didn't belong to any base I knew. The walls were too clean, too white. There were no windows. My clothes were gone. On the nightstand beside me was a glass of water and a single sheet of paper. It read, You were never there. When I came to, the world was wrapped in silence again. No hum of engines, no chatter of crew, just the mechanical rhythm of air vents and a faint distant buzz, like a fluorescent light somewhere behind the walls. My arms felt heavy, my veins warm. They drugged me, I knew that much. The taste in my mouth was chemical, bitter, the kind that coats your teeth and doesn't leave no matter how hard you swallow. A nurse, at least I think she was a nurse, appeared at my bedside. She wore white from head to toe, even her eyes hidden behind tinted goggles. She didn't speak, just checked a 4-line and wrote something down on a clipboard that had no name, no logo, nothing. When I tried to sit up, she pressed a gloved hand to my chest and said softly, Not yet, Captain. Her voice was calm, too calm, like she was reading from a script she'd practiced 1,000 times. How long have I been here? I asked. She didn't answer. Where are my men? She paused, pen hovering above paper. You should rest. They'll brief you soon. Who will? I snapped, but she was already gone, the door sealing shut behind her with a hiss. Hours passed, or maybe days. It was impossible to tell in that place. The lights never changed. My dreams were full of white noise and violet light. The hum of something beneath the ice still vibrating in the back of my skull. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Taylor's face, frozen mid-scream, the Aurora reflected in his pupils. Eventually the door opened again, and 2 men stepped in. Both wore gray suits, clean and pressed. No insignia, no names. They could have been government, military, or something in between. The taller one smiled as he pulled a chair up beside the bed. Good afternoon, Captain. Afternoon? What day is it? He ignored the question. My name's Dr. Miller, he said, though his voice had the cadence of someone used to command, not medicine. You've been through a traumatic event. We need to clarify some inconsistencies in your report. I haven't filed a report, I said. He smiled again, not kindly. Not yet. The shorter man set a small recorder on the table. The red light blinked. Please describe your mission objective on the night of January 12th, 1962. I hesitated. My mouth felt dry. We were ordered to deliver a classified payload to coordinates north of the Arctic Circle. Command structure was unclear. We were briefed under Operation Aurora. They exchanged a look, subtle but sharp. And what did you observe? I took a breath. I could still hear the engines in my head, the scream in the radio, the impossible geometry of that light. An anomaly, I said finally. Atmospheric, possibly magnetic. It interfered with our instruments. Miller leaned forward. Captain, did you encounter any hostiles? No. Did you release ordnance? Yes. Do you recall what it was? I met his eyes. No, sir. He smiled again, satisfied. Good. You're remembering correctly. That sentence chilled me more than anything else in that room. You're remembering correctly. like memory was something they could approve. After they left, I found a small scar at the base of my skull, tender like a fresh incision. I touched it and felt a tingle run through my spine, a hum that matched the rhythm of the lights above me. Something in me didn't feel entirely mine anymore. The next day, or whatever passed for a day, they brought me into a larger room. Plain concrete, table, 2 chairs. The kind of place designed to make you doubt your own voice. Miller sat across from me, hands folded. "Captain," he began, "your aircraft went down during a routine navigation exercise. There was no classified mission. There was no payload. Do you understand?" "That's not true," I said. He tilted his head slightly, as if studying a specimen. "You were caught in a magnetic storm. Disorientation, oxygen deprivation, perfectly explainable symptoms. You've been experiencing hallucinations. That's normal after trauma." I wasn't hallucinating. He pressed a button on a small remote. The wall behind him lit up, showing a black and white photo. Our bomber, half buried in snow. No glow, no shapes, no strange light. Just wreckage. "This is what we recovered," he said. "No evidence of what you're describing. Your men are being treated for shock. You'll all be debriefed and reassigned." I stared at the photo. It looked wrong, sanitized, stripped of the impossible. "Where's Taylor?" I asked. Miller didn't blink. "Captain Taylor was never assigned to your crew." My stomach dropped. "That's a lie." "Is it?" he said quietly. "Sometimes the mind invents people to cope with stress. We've seen it before. The important thing is to let go of these fabrications for your own health." He slid a document across the table. A single page, heavy paper. At the top, confidentiality agreement, National Security Directive 10-84. "You'll sign this," he said, "and you'll forget what you think you saw. That's an order." I looked at the pen, then back at him. "What if I don't?" His smile returned, thin, cold. "Then you'll spend the rest of your life convincing yourself that you didn't." They left me alone with the paper. The lights flickered once, briefly revealing something scratched into the table's surface. 3 words, "It's still alive." I signed the paper. Not because I believed them, but because I wanted to get out. Because I knew whatever was beneath that ice hadn't died when we dropped it, and if I stayed there any longer, neither would I. When they finally released me, it was dark again. A car with tinted windows waited outside the facility. No one spoke during the drive. When they dropped me off at an airfield in the middle of nowhere, I realized my uniform had changed. No patches, no name tag, no rank. Just a man in a flight jacket that didn't belong to any branch anymore. As the car disappeared down the road, I looked up at the night sky. The Aurora shimmered faintly in the distance, pale violet, like it was still watching. And for the first time, I understood why they called it Operation Aurora. It wasn't about the light. It was about what came through it. It took me almost 20 years to start talking about that night again. You don't just wake up one morning and decide to reopen hell. You try to live. You try to forget. But the past has a way of waiting, patient, silent, breathing down the back of your neck when the world gets quiet. After they released me, I stayed in the service for another 5 years. I flew cargo planes, training missions, anything that kept me in the air. But the skies weren't the same anymore. Every cloud looked like it was hiding something. Every flicker of static on the radio felt like a whisper from the north. When I finally retired, they gave me a medal I didn't earn and a handshake that felt rehearsed. They said I'd served with distinction. I smiled for the photo, saluted the flag, and walked away. Nobody mentioned Aurora. Nobody ever did. For a while, I thought maybe Miller had been right. Maybe the brain does invent ghosts to fill the gaps. I drank a little too much, moved from base housing to a small cabin outside of Montana. Thought I'd live out my days fishing, fixing engines, keeping quiet. But silence isn't peace, not when you're carrying something like that. It started small. A hum in the night, faint and low, like an engine idling somewhere far away. Sometimes it came from the radio, even when it wasn't plugged in. Sometimes it came from inside my head. I went to the VA hospital once, just to make sure I wasn't losing it. The doctor told me it was tinnitus, maybe early signs of neuropathy. He didn't notice that the sound only started when the northern lights appeared on the horizon. Then came the visitors. The first was a man who claimed to be from the Department of Veterans Affairs. He showed up one morning in a government sedan, crisp suit, polished shoes that didn't match the mud of my driveway. He said he was updating old case files from the 1960s. I didn't invite him in, but he didn't need permission. He already knew too much. My service number, my missions, even the location of the crash site. At some point, he leaned in and asked, "Do you still dream about the light, Captain?" I froze. "Who told you that?" He smiled, that same polite, practiced smile Miller used to wear, and said, "Some secrets have long shadows." When I blinked, he was gone. No car, no footprints, nothing but tire marks half buried in snow. That night, I went down to the basement and pulled out the box I swore I'd never open again. The one marked Aurora. Inside were all the things I wasn't supposed to have kept, fragments of the flight log, a melted piece of paneling from the bomber, and a single black and white photograph. The photo had faded over time, but the shape behind the plane was still there. A distortion, like heat shimmer in the air, forming an arc behind our tail. When I held it under the light, something new appeared, faint lines, geometric, etched into the surface like they'd burned themselves in after the fact. A symbol I'd seen before. The crossed-out eye. I started digging. Old records, declassified reports, anything connected to experimental flights in the Arctic during the Cold War. Most of it had been redacted, black ink covering half the pages, but I found patterns. Names. A chain of projects. Aurora, Ecliptic, Deep Winter. Same locations, same type of personnel, and always that damn symbol. In 1981, I got a letter with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a line typed across it. They never stopped. I burned the letter, but the words stayed. I couldn't shake the thought, if Operation Aurora didn't end, what the hell were they doing now? A few months later, I got my answer. It was a clear night, February. I was sitting on the porch with a bottle of bourbon and a shortwave radio I'd rebuilt from scrap. Static, the usual military chatter, nothing unusual until I heard it. A voice repeating coordinates. Northern sector, high latitude, exact same numbers we'd flown to in 1962. The signal was faint, distorted, but I knew that voice. Taylor. I nearly dropped the glass. It couldn't be. Taylor was dead. I'd seen him die. The voice repeated once more, then faded into static. I tried to trace the source, but the frequency kept shifting as if it were bouncing between satellites. That night, I dreamed of the bomber, not as wreckage, but whole again, flying through the violet light. Taylor in the co-pilot's seat, turning to look at me, eyes glowing like reflection off ice. When I woke, my radio was still on. The dial was glowing faintly blue. I didn't sleep for 3 days. Then, around the 4th night, the hum came back, louder than before. The entire cabin shook, glasses rattling in the cupboards. Outside, the sky was alive again. Not green this time, but violet, the same color I'd seen over the Arctic. And for the first time in 20 years, I heard that sound again. The one that isn't sound. The one that talks through the marrow of your bones. It said one word. Return. I didn't plan to go back. Hell, I swore I never would. But when that word came through the static, return, it felt less like a command and more like gravity. Something pulling at me from the inside. I tried to ignore it. I really did. I turned off the radio, threw it in the trash, poured another drink, told myself I was just losing my mind. But that night, I dreamed of the snow again. The same cold air, the same broken wings. I could feel the weight of the flight jacket on my shoulders, smell the burnt metal, the jet fuel. And when I looked down, I wasn't standing on the crash site. I was standing beneath it, inside the ice, looking up through a wall of glass, so thick the sky was just a smear of color. And something was moving above me. I woke up gasping. My heart felt like it had been squeezed by a fist. When I looked out the window, the northern horizon was glowing. Pale violet, just like before. That's when I knew I had to go back. It wasn't bravery. It was desperation. You can't live your whole life running from one night. It catches up in dreams, in memories, in every reflection you see that isn't quite your own. I packed a small duffel bag, warm clothes, maps, my old sidearm, and the photo from the Aurora box. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Who would I tell? There's no one left. I drove north. Miles of nothing. The air got colder, the roads thinner, until it was just me and the sound of the engine. Every few hours, I'd see a car behind me, black sedan, no plates, but when I pulled over, it disappeared. Could have been paranoia. Could have been them. Doesn't matter anymore. When I crossed into Alaska, I stopped in a small diner off the highway. The waitress poured me coffee without asking. She must have seen something in my face because she didn't say a word. Old songs played on the radio, the kind that make you think time stopped somewhere in 1972. There was a TV in the corner showing weather updates, heavy storms over the Arctic Circle. The kind of storms that don't just happen. The map I brought was military issue, old, edges frayed. I traced my finger over the coordinates from that night. They led straight into a restricted zone, no fly area, no civilian access. But I knew what was really there, or at least what used to be. Before I left the diner, the waitress came back. She slipped a folded note under my cup and whispered, "They don't like it when people go that far north." When I opened the note later, all it said was, "If you see the light, don't look up." Same words as the note they'd slid under my door 60 years ago. My hand shook so bad I could barely drive. The closer I got, the more the sky changed. It started glowing faintly at the edges, not the green of the normal aurora, but that strange violet hue again, like the sky had bruised. My compass spun once, twice, then stopped working altogether. The radio came alive on its own, whispering in that same low hum. You don't forget that sound once you've heard it. It's not noise. It's language. The kind that bypasses your ears and goes straight to your bones. I could almost make out words this time, fragments, awake, breach, complete. I didn't know if they were warnings or invitations. By the time I reached the old access road, there was nothing left of the base. The gates were gone. The buildings collapsed. Just a graveyard of twisted steel and ice. But there were tracks, fresh ones, leading toward the valley. Snowmobiles. Maybe 3, maybe 4. Government issue. I parked the truck and walked the rest of the way. The wind cut through me like wire. The world felt thinner out there, like the air had forgotten how to breathe. Then I saw it. What was left of the runway. Or what had replaced it. The ice wasn't smooth anymore. It was cracked, bulging upward like something underneath had tried to surface. And in the middle of it all was a hole, perfectly circular, 50 feet across. The light was pouring out of it, pulsing slow and steady, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. I stood there, staring into that glow, and for a moment I thought I saw shapes moving below the surface. Not people, not machines, just motion. Life, maybe, but not the kind we understand. Then I heard engines behind me. I turned. Headlights. 3 black snowmobiles closing in fast. I ducked behind a ridge, heart hammering. The men were wearing white suits, same kind I'd seen the night of the crash. One of them had a rifle slung over his shoulder. They were scanning the area with handheld devices, some kind of detector. One of them looked straight toward where I was hiding and said, "We're not alone." I started backing away, slow, keeping low. The snow crunched too loud. The beam of a flashlight swept past my face. "Stop right there," a voice shouted. I ran. Shots cracked through the air. Snow exploded around my boots. I didn't look back. I just ran toward the glow, the only light in that endless dark. And then, everything went quiet. The wind stopped. The gunfire stopped. The world just paused. The ice beneath my feet began to move. A low vibration, rising fast, deep enough to shake my teeth. I looked down and saw it, the same violet light, blooming outward like veins spreading through glass. It surrounded me, lifting the air itself until it shimmered. I should have been terrified, but I wasn't. Not anymore. It felt familiar. The light climbed, wrapping around me, and I heard a voice. Not from outside, from inside. "Calm, steady, ancient," it said. "You were chosen to return what was never yours." Then everything went white. When I woke up, it was dawn. No men, no snowmobiles, no hole in the ice. Just silence and a sky that looked like it had never been touched. My truck was parked a few hundred yards away, engine still running, keys in the ignition. And on the seat beside me was a single item. A flight logbook. My flight logbook. The last entry was dated January 12, 1962. Only one word was written in red ink across the page. Return. I don't know how long I sat there in that truck. Could have been minutes, could have been hours. The engine hummed, steady and low, like it was the only thing in the world still sure of itself. I kept staring at that logbook on the seat. My name, my handwriting. Only, I hadn't written in that book since the day they took it from me. The pages were clean until the last one. January 12, 1962, the date of the mission. The ink was still fresh, like it had been written yesterday. And that one word, return. I said it out loud, just to hear how it sounded in my voice. It didn't sound like a word anymore. It sounded like an order. I looked up at the horizon. The light was gone. Just gray sky and the kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums. But the air still felt charged, like the world was holding its breath, waiting to see what I'd do next. I drove south back toward Anchorage. The roads looked the same, but something felt off. Empty towns. Gas stations that should have been there weren't. Signs I remembered reading before were just gone. Like the world had rearranged itself while I was gone. Halfway down the highway, I passed a man walking alone through the snow. No jacket, no hat, just a dark suit and a briefcase. He didn't even look at me. When I slowed down, he turned his head just enough for me to see his face. It was Miller. Older, yes, but unmistakable. I slammed the brakes, jumped out of the truck, shouting his name. He didn't stop, didn't even turn around, just kept walking down the center of the road until he faded into the fog. I got back in the truck, heart pounding. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it wasn't him. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't walking away from something. He was walking back toward it. By the time I made it to Anchorage, night had fallen again. The motel clerk looked at me like I was a ghost. He said I'd already checked in 2 days ago. He handed me a key I didn't remember taking. Room 12. Inside, everything was just how I'd have left it. Same duffel bag, same coat, even the radio on the nightstand. But I hadn't been there. I know I hadn't. I sat on the bed, staring at that radio, until I noticed something new. There was a note taped to the back. Typed, same font as before. "We told you not to return." I tore it off and threw it across the room. The radio clicked on by itself. Static first. Then the same voice I'd heard on a flight all those years ago. Calm, mechanical, cold. Containment compromised. I whispered, "What are you?" Static. Then, "You carried the seed." We followed it home. Every light in the room flickered. The air got colder. I reached for the radio, but it burned my hand, ice cold, not hot, just wrong. I unplugged it. It stayed on. Then the sound changed. Beneath the static, I could hear breathing. Human. Close. I turned slowly toward the mirror across the room. My reflection wasn't moving. I stood up. The reflection stayed seated. Its head tilted just slightly, like it was studying me. Then in the glass, my reflection smiled. I didn't. I threw a lamp at it. The glass shattered, but for a split second before it broke, I saw the violet light flare behind my reflection, spilling through cracks in the mirror like liquid fire. The radio went silent. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor, gun in my lap, waiting for dawn. When it came, I packed what I could and left the motel without looking back. I drove west. No plan, just instinct. I needed answers, something that made sense. I went through old contacts, retired men who'd flown with me back then. Most were gone, dead, missing, or transferred to agencies that no longer existed. One of them, Gomez, had a wife still living in Oregon. I tracked her down. She was in a care home, frail but sharp. When I told her my name, she froze. "You're alive?" she whispered. "They said none of you made it back." I told her that wasn't true. She shook her head. You don't understand. He came home 2 weeks after you disappeared. But he wasn't the same. What do you mean? He stopped talking, she said. Stopped eating. Every night, he'd go outside and just stare at the sky. Said he could hear them humming. Said the light wasn't done. What happened to him? She looked down at her hands. One night, he went missing. Left nothing but his watch. And it was still ticking. I asked to see it. She led me to a box on her dresser, opened it, and there it was, Gomez's old wristwatch. Still running, after all those years. Only, the second hand wasn't moving clockwise. It was ticking backward. I left that house shaking. I got in the truck and turned the radio on again, even though I swore I wouldn't. Static. Then that hum, soft, rising, familiar. A voice said, "You can't run from the sky, Captain." I slammed the radio off, but the hum didn't stop. It was inside the truck now, in the air, in the engine, in me. I don't know how much time I have left. Maybe none. But if anyone ever finds this recording, if anyone hears my voice, remember this. It wasn't about the war. It was never about nations or bombs or power. It was about contact. And contact always leaves something behind. I started noticing it a few days after leaving Oregon. Little things at first. My hands would shake even when I wasn't cold. Sometimes when I looked down at them, the veins along my wrists seemed to faintly glow, just for a second, like something pulsing under the skin. I told myself it was nerves, bad circulation, maybe my imagination catching up with me. But deep down, I knew better. Every night, the hum grew louder. Not constant, not outside, inside me. Like I'd swallowed the engine of that damn bomber, and it was still running. Sometimes I could feel it vibrate in my teeth, in my chest. It didn't hurt. It just reminded me that I wasn't alone anymore. I started recording these tapes around then. Not because I thought anyone would believe me, but because I needed proof. Proof that my voice still sounded like my own. That my thoughts were still mine. The first time it happened, I was shaving. Normal morning, normal routine. I looked in the mirror, and for a heartbeat, I didn't recognize the man staring back. My reflection blinked a moment too late. Just one frame off, like an old film reel. I stepped closer, and that's when I saw it. My pupils were reflecting light that wasn't there. A faint violet shimmer. Same color as the sky that night. I dropped the razor, cut my palm open on the sink. Blood ran down into the drain, and for a moment it looked like it was moving upstream. I turned on the faucet, washed it away, told myself it was shock, exhaustion, anything but the truth. Later that day, I heard knocking on the door. 3 sharp raps. When I opened it, no one was there. Just an envelope on the ground, sealed with wax. Inside was a single Polaroid photo, taken from behind my cabin, same angle as my porch, only I hadn't taken it. In the photo, I was sitting in my chair, staring at the trees. And behind me, in the tree lean, was a faint glow. Violet. I burned the picture. The flame turned blue. That night, I dreamed I was back inside the plane. Taylor was there, alive, his face calm, peaceful. He said, "You brought it home, Cap. Now it's waiting." When I asked what it was, he just smiled and pointed to my chest. When I woke up, the hum was stronger than ever. My heartbeat felt off, not faster, not slower, just wrong. Too steady, too synchronized, like it wasn't beating for me anymore. I tried to call someone at the VA, tell them I was having side effect from an old injury. The receptionist transferred me to a special department. The man who answered spoke softly, professionally. He asked for my service number. I gave it to him. There was a pause, and then he said, "Captain, we've been expecting your call." I hung up. That same night, I caught my reflection again, in the window this time. It was still me, but the light around my face seemed to bend, faintly warping like heat distortion. And for a second, I could see something behind my own eyes, movement. Not a shape, just the sense of presence. It didn't scare me. That's what scared me most. You spend long enough in silence, and you start to hear the quiet differently. It's not empty, it's full. The world hums, and now I can hear it. Every wire in the wall, every power line outside, every magnetic field buzzing against the sky. It's like the planet itself is speaking in a language I was never meant to understand. And maybe I wasn't supposed to. I've been thinking about what that voice said at the ice. You were chosen to return what was never yours. Maybe they weren't talking about the payload. Maybe they were talking about me. Whatever they put in that bomb bay, whatever was inside that steel casing. Maybe it wasn't meant to stay buried. Maybe it needed a carrier. Maybe that's why I survived when the others didn't. When I touch metal now, it hums. Lights flicker when I walk past. Dogs won't come near me. Sometimes I hear whispers when I turn off the radio, not voices, more like echoes. Words formed out of static. Always the same. We're almost home. I don't know what that means. I don't want to know. But I can feel it, the connection getting stronger. Some nights, I wake up and I can see the sky glowing again, faint and soft, even through the roof. And every time it happens, I feel a pull on my chest, gentle but insistent, like a heartbeat that isn't mine answering something far away. I think whatever was in the Arctic, whatever I drop, it's calling back. And I don't think I have the strength to ignore it much longer. I started noticing the cars about a week ago. Same make, same color. Parked at different corners every day, engines off, windows tinted. They don't stay long, just enough for me to see them. Sometimes it's a sedan, sometimes a van with no markings. No plates, always the same rhythm. They appear when the hum gets louder. I try to tell myself it was coincidence. Paranoia. But then I found a microphone under my porch. Small, military grade. I know the kind. We used them in recon back in the 60s. It was still warm when I touched it, like someone had just turned it off. So I stopped sleeping upstairs. I sleep down here now, in the basement, next to the recorder. Every night, I press the red button, and I talk. It's the only thing that keeps me sane, my own voice on tape, proof that I still exist in the version of the world that remembers me. A few nights ago, I woke up to knocking again. Same pattern. 3 short, 2 long. Morse code for urgent. I froze. Whoever it was knew how to speak my language. I grabbed my gun, went upstairs, opened the door. And there was no one there. Just another envelope. Inside was a single photograph. Not old this time, new. Taken from across the street. It showed me, sitting here recording this. The timestamp at the bottom said, live feed. They're not just watching me. They're listening right now. Maybe they always were. I keep thinking about what that man, Miller, said the first time I met him. You're remembering correctly. Back then I thought it was gaslighting, manipulation. But what if he meant it literally? What if my memory isn't just mine? What if it's programmed? The doctors, the injections, the scar at the base of my skull, I used to think they were just keeping us quiet. Now I'm not so sure. What if they weren't silencing us? What if they were tuning us? Sometimes when the hum rises, I can almost hear words in it. Not from the outside, from inside my head. They come slow, fragmented, like an old transmission breaking through static. Hold still. Do not run. We are near. And I can't help but feel like those voices aren't talking to me. They're talking through me. 2 nights ago, I woke up and my radio was on again. I hadn't touched it in days. The frequency was fixed on a channel I'd never used before, 144.0 megahertz. The voice that came through wasn't mechanical this time. It was human, tired, familiar. It said, Cap, if you can hear me. They're coming back. It was Taylor. The voice was faint, broken, like it was bleeding through the static from somewhere far away. They never shut it down, he said. They just moved it underground. You have to destroy it before they use you again. And then nothing. I tried tracing the signal, but the equipment I have is old, analog. The frequency kept shifting like it was alive. When I checked the direction finder, it pointed north. Always north. Back to the Arctic. That's when I realized the truth. I'm not being hunted because I broke silence. I'm being tracked because whatever I brought back with me is still active. And they want it back. I see men at the tree line sometimes. Standing still. Too still. Faces covered, shoulders squared, rifles low. They never move. Not until I blink. Then they're gone. But I can feel them out there, waiting. Last night, the power went out. No storm. No reason. The whole cabin plunged into black. I lit a candle, and the flame bent, not from wind, but from something else, a pressure in the air, like the world had shifted a fraction sideways. And then I heard again, that same voice, close now, whispering just behind me. Return what was never yours. I turned, but there was nothing there. Just the reflection of the candle in the window and my own eyes glowing faintly violet in the glass. I don't think the government knows what they're dealing with. They think they're chasing a man with secrets. They don't understand that the secret has been alive all along, and it's tired of hiding. I can't tell which day this is anymore. When you live alone long enough, days start to smear together. But this feels different. The tapes are out of order. I rewind one and hear things I don't remember saying. Sometimes I play a tape that should be blank, and my voice answers questions I haven't asked yet. The hum hasn't stopped for 3 days. It comes and goes in waves like breathing. When it peaks, the lights dim. I've unplugged everything, but the recorder still runs. Maybe that's what's keeping me grounded. The red light blinking, proof that there's still a here and a now. I listen back sometimes. I hear myself talking slower, softer. Between the words, something else breathes. At first, I thought it was just feedback, but now, it sounds like someone else is on these tapes with me. Last night, I woke up sitting in this chair. The recorder was already on. I don't remember pressing the button. I was speaking, calm, steady, about coordinates I don't recall learning. I said them 3 times before stopping, like I was waiting for an answer. Well, I checked a map later. The coordinates pointed north again, back to the same patch of nothing. I haven't left the cabin in 2 days. Every time I try, I see the flash of headlights down the road. They never get closer. They just sit there, idling in the dark. I think they wanted to leave on my own. The strangest thing is, I'm not afraid anymore. That terrifies me more than anything. I remember the Arctic, the light under the ice. I remember thinking it was outside of us. But what if it wasn't? What if the light was always meant to be inside? Maybe that's why we were chosen, pilots, navigators, men used to following signals no one else can hear. Maybe they needed vessels who could carry the frequency home. Sometimes when the hum hits a certain pitch, I can see the air ripple. Tiny distortions like heat haze, but colder. If I reach toward them, my hand disappears for a split second, not gone, just elsewhere. When it comes back, it tingles like static. I've been trying to document it. I keep a notebook. The lines don't stay still anymore. The words slide on the page, rearranging themselves into patterns that look like those markings on the old photos. Circles, angles, that same crossed-out eye. I draw it over and over, and every time I do, I feel the pulse under my ribs answer. I played one of the old flight recordings tonight. You can still hear the engines, the chatter, the panic when the instruments failed. But under all that noise, there's another sound I never noticed before, a rhythm, like a heartbeat synced to the static. I slowed the tape down, and for the first time I understood, it isn't background noise. It's a message. It says, "We're already here." I shut it off, sat in the dark for an hour, thought about burning everything, the tapes, the notes, the logbook. But what's the point? Fire won't destroy what isn't made of matter. I caught my reflection again tonight, in the lens of the camera. It blinked before I did. There's a faint halo around my head in the playback, a shimmer that shouldn't be there. Maybe it's just a lens flare. Maybe it's something waking up. If anyone ever finds these tapes, I want them to know I tried. I try to stay human. I try to remember which parts of me belong to the sky and which belong to the ground. But I can feel the line blurring now. The hum isn't outside anymore. It is me. My pulse matches it perfectly. Every beat says the same thing, over and over. Return, return, return. If I disappear, maybe that's what I was meant to do. I keep the camera running now, day and night. I don't even check if there's tape left anymore. It's easier that way. If something happens to me, at least there'll be proof that I was still here, or that I thought I was. The hum hasn't stopped in weeks. It's not loud anymore. It's quieter, closer. It follows the rhythm of my breathing, like we've learned to move together. I've stopped fighting it. You can only resist for so long before you forget what silence used to sound like. Sometimes I talk to it, not out loud, not in words, just in thoughts. And sometimes it answers, not in English, not in anything human, but I understand it anyway. Like remembering a language I used to know before I was born. It says things like, "We were never above you," or "You made us visible." I don't know what that means. But every time it speaks, I feel less afraid and more, I don't know, seen. I still try to keep routines. Coffee in the morning, notes at night. Writing helps, even though the words don't always stay where I put them. Yesterday I wrote, "The sky is quiet." This morning it said, "The sky is waiting." Same handwriting, same ink, not mine. I look older every day. Not just the kind of older that comes with time, something deeper. My eyes look different in the playback. Not brighter, not darker, just aware. Like there's more of me behind them than there used to be. I get letters sometimes. No return address. Plain envelopes. Inside, blank paper. But if I hold them to the light, faint marks appear, coordinates, always the same ones. Sometimes there's a symbol at the bottom. The crossed-out eye. I think I finally understand what it means. It's not about blindness. It's about memory. About the things we were never supposed to see, and the cost of seeing them anyway. I've been thinking about that night again, the Arctic, the drop, the light under the ice. Everyone always talks about fear in moments like that. But what I felt wasn't fear. It was recognition. Like meeting an old friend I didn't remember until that second. Maybe that's what they were trying to hide. Not monsters. Not aliens. Just a truth too big for our kind of mind. Something that doesn't hate us or help us. It just exists, waiting for us to listen. The government, the doctors, the men in suits, they didn't want to silence me because I'd seen something terrible. They wanted to silence me because I'd heard something true. I keep wondering if the others felt it too before they disappeared. If Taylor ever realized he wasn't dying that night, he was changing. Maybe he crossed over completely. Maybe that's what return really means. Not going back somewhere, but becoming part of it again. I can feel it happening to me. Slow, gentle. My hands don't shake anymore. My heart doesn't race. It hums. Everything hums. The cabin, the trees, the power lines miles away. It's all part of the same song. If you're watching this, if somehow this tape gets out, don't look for me. Don't look for proof. You won't find a body. You won't find a crash site. You'll find the hum, though. It's everywhere. It's been there since before us. You just have to listen closely enough. And when you finally hear it, you'll understand why I couldn't stay quiet any longer. I turned the camera on again tonight. Not because I have anything new to say, but because the silence feels heavier when I don't fill it with something. The hum's still there, soft now, like the sound of wind through an empty hangar. I can almost pretend it's normal. Almost. I keep thinking about that night. Every time I close my eyes, the memory rearranges itself. Small details shift, sounds stretch or vanish. But lately it's been getting clearer, sharper, like the fog is lifting on its own. I don't know if that means I'm remembering or if something else wants me to. I remember the ice, how bright it was beneath us, the way the light rippled like water trapped under glass. They told us to drop the payload and turn back, but we hovered there longer than we should have. Maybe that was my mistake. I should have followed orders. Instead, I watched. When I think back now, I can feel the heat of the cockpit on my skin. My gloves were damp. Taylor's voice was a low hum, steady calm. He was reading altitude, speed, all the numbers that kept the world in order. But then there was another sound, something between us and the static. Not loud, just a tone that didn't belong. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't Morse or radar interference. It felt deliberate, like someone or something was testing a frequency until it matched ours. When it did, the world outside the glass changed. The Aurora folded inward, like the sky itself was breathing. The clouds flattened, bending around the plane, and everything went quiet. For a heartbeat, we were suspended in a place where up and down didn't matter. No stars, no horizon, just violet light, pulsing slow as a heartbeat. I've spent decades trying to explain that feeling. Not terror, not awe, something older. Recognition. I think that's what they were afraid of. Not what we saw, but what it made us remember. After the crash, after the debriefing, they told me the human brain fills in gaps during trauma. That I invented the light to make sense of chaos. But they never explained why. When I dream of that night, I can still feel the weight of something pressing against the glass of the cockpit, like a hand trying to reach through. It's strange. The older I get, the less certain I am of which version of that night is real. There's the one they taught me to believe, and the one that won't stop playing in my head. The difference is simple. In mine, something reached back. Sometimes I replay the footage in my mind, the flashes, the way the instruments went dead. And there's always this moment, right before everything falls apart, when the light outside the window shifts from violet to white. I used to think that was the flare from the engines. But I've come to realize it was something else, something waking up. I didn't talk about it for years because I thought silence would protect me. But silence just feeds it. It grows in the quiet, moves through the gaps between heartbeats. The hum is its language, and now I can understand pieces of it. Not words, just feelings. And the strongest one is always the same. Remember. That's what I'm doing. Remembering. When I watch these tapes back, I see things I don't recall saying. I'll blink, and for a few frames the lighting changes. The air behind me bends like heat. It's subtle, but it's there, a shimmer in the corner. Sometimes it looks like wings. Sometimes like nothing at all. I don't edit the tapes. I don't have to. Whatever's happening, it wants to be seen. The other night, I dreamed of the ice again, but this time I wasn't in the plane. I was below it, standing on a surface that wasn't ice anymore but glass, looking up through a sea of light. I could see the bomber overhead, frozen mid-flight. Taylor was at the controls. I could see him mouthing something, but there was no sound. Then, slowly, he turned his head and looked straight down at me. I woke up before I could see what was behind him. I used to think dreams were just the mind replaying what it can't process. Now I think they're transmissions, echoes bouncing between two places that were never meant to touch. I'm starting to wonder if the crash ever really ended. Maybe I never left that ice. Maybe this cabin, these tapes, this body is what happens when you come back changed. I can still smell the fuel sometimes. Still feel the pull of the yoke in my hands, steady and alive. The hum matches the pitch of those engines exactly. When it rises, I swear I can hear the plane calling for me, somewhere just beyond hearing. I keep the camera on because I need a witness. Even if it's just a lens, even if no one ever watches. There's comfort in the idea that someone might. If you're listening, if this ever reaches you, remember this. The things buried in silence don't stay buried. They wait. And when they call you to remember, you will. I think I remember now. Not all at once, not clearly, but enough that it scares me. Memory doesn't come back in order. It comes in flashes, little cuts of light, pieces of sound that don't belong together until they do. I can't tell if I'm remembering or dreaming, but feels real. Too real. I remember the smell first. It wasn't fuel. It wasn't metal or oil. It was sweet, like ozone mixed with something alive. I remember Taylor saying, "That can't be from the engines." And he was right. It wasn't. Then the radio, static, and underneath it a voice. Not command, not even human, exactly, but clear. A woman's tone, calm and steady. She said, "Payload activated. Maintain altitude." I thought maybe it was some pre-recorded message, an automated sequence. But when I asked Gomez if he'd heard it, he said, "She said your name, Cap." I didn't believe him until I heard it again. Captain Reynolds. Maintain altitude. She knew my name. We never got orders with my name in them. Not once. Orders are impersonal, detached. But this voice, whoever she was talking directly to me. When we opened the bomb bay doors, the light wasn't coming from outside, it was coming from inside the payload. Through the casing. I could see it bleeding through the metal, faint at first, then brighter. I remember thinking the casing looked wrong, like it wasn't built to contain something, but to channel it. I told Taylor to abort the drop. He hesitated. Then the voice came again. "Release sequence confirmed. Proceed." I looked down at the controls. The switch was already flipped. None of us had touched it. The payload dropped, but it didn't fall. It floated. The whole plane lifted for a second, like gravity forgot how to work. The light poured out of the open bay, flooding the cabin, washing everything in white. Taylor screamed, Gomez shouted that the gauges were dead, and then the voice changed. It wasn't calm anymore. It was urgent. Containment failure. Breach imminent. That's when the sky tore open. There's no other way to say it. The horizon bent upward, like a sheet of glass cracking under heat. I could see through it, like there was another sky behind ours, full of color and movement and things. Shapes that looked alive but weren't. Something reached through. Not a hand, not an arm, just a form, fluid and bright, like it was made of the same light that filled the bay. It didn't grab the plane. It touched it. And in that moment, I felt it touch me too. It wasn't cold. It wasn't hot. It was understanding. Like every thought I'd ever had was being read all at once. Taylor was yelling, "It's in the ship." Gomez was trying to shut the doors, but they wouldn't close. The voice kept repeating, "Containment failure. Evacuate vector." But we couldn't move. We were frozen there, watching the sky come apart. And then, this part one hadn't remembered until now, something spoke inside my head. Not through the radio. Not through sound. Straight into thought. It said, "You are the door." I blacked out after that. When I woke, we were already going down. Fire, smoke, alarms. Taylor was unconscious. The radio was gone, burned out. The voice was gone too. But the light, whatever it was, wasn't. It was inside the plane now, drifting like fog, pulsing in rhythm with the engines. I remember one last thing before the crash. I looked at my hands on the controls, and the veins were glowing faintly violet. That's the memory they took from me. That's what they buried. It wasn't just a failed mission, it was contact. The payload wasn't a weapon. It was a signal, something to wake up whatever was under that ice. And we didn't just deliver it. We became part of it. I know now that containment failure didn't mean the object escaped. It meant it merged with us, with me. That's why they kept me alive. That's why they followed me all these years. I thought they wanted to silence me. But maybe they've just been waiting for the signal to start again. I can feel it coming back now. The hum, the pull, the light behind my eyes. Every time I close them, I see the sky bending, the glass cracking, the hand of light reaching through. And I can hear that voice again. The same calm, steady tone, whispering just beneath the static. Payload active. Maintain altitude. Only now. It's not talking to the plane. It's talking to me. I started another tape tonight. I don't even check the counter anymore. The numbers spin too fast to mean anything. Maybe I've been talking for hours, maybe minutes. It all blends together now. The hum, the light, my own voice coming back through the speakers a half second too late, like the room is learning how to echo. I used to believe the camera was a kind of shield. As long as the red light was on, I was still here, still human, still separate from whatever waits behind the silence. Lately, I'm not so sure. When I play the recordings back, there are frames missing, tiny skips like the world blinked. Sometimes my mouth moves after the words come out. Earlier tonight, I rewound one of the older tapes. I wanted to remind myself what I sounded like when I still believed I could end this story on my own terms. Halfway through, I heard another sound layered onto my voice. Not static, breathing. A low rhythm that matched mine exactly until it didn't. I paused the tape. The breathing kept going. For a long time, I just sat there listening. It slowed when I slowed, quickened when I whispered. It wasn't coming from the speakers. It was in the room. I asked quietly, "Are you here?" The hum in my chest answered before the air did. A vibration, faint but certain, like a second heartbeat aligning with my own. I told myself to stop talking to it, to stop giving it shape, but silence has become impossible. The house hums even when the power's cut. The candlelight bends when I breathe. Sometimes the camera focuses on empty corners, as if it's found something worth recording that I can't see. I watched the last tape again this morning. There's a moment, right before I lean forward to switch the camera off, where the lens pulls focus past me, to the back wall. For half a frame, the shadow there moves the wrong way. It's subtle. Most people wouldn't notice. But I was trained to notice small things, tiny deviations that mean disaster. That's how you survive in the air. I keep telling myself this is all just memory leaking into the present. The mind trying to fill the gaps. But each time I press record, the world feels thinner, like I'm talking through glass instead of air. There's a new tone in the hum now. Higher, cleaner, almost musical. It reminds me of the system's check before takeoff, the steady rising pitch before the engines settle into their rhythm. Every pilot knows that sound. The moment right before flight, when the plane decides whether to hold together or come apart. Maybe that's what's happening here. Maybe this body, this place, is the cockpit, and I'm waiting for clearance to leave. I still dream about the ice. I still see Taylor standing beside the open bay, staring into that impossible light. But the dream has changed. The light isn't beneath us anymore. It's above, like we're the ones trapped under the surface now, looking up. When I wake, the camera is always on, even when I swear I turned it off. I tried pulling the batteries, but the red light stayed lit. I don't know if it's recording or just watching. Sometimes I catch myself speaking words I don't understand. Not English. Not any language I know. I only realize it when I play the tape back later. The syllables roll like static, but the feeling they leave is clear. Welcome. I think about turning the camera off for good, ending this. But every time I reach for it, the hum rises until my hand trembles. It's not fear that stops me, it's recognition. The same feeling from that night in the Arctic. The sense that if I stop now, I'll lose whatever connection is keeping me here. Maybe that's all this is. A conversation. Me and the thing inside the light, talking through tape and glass and memory. If you're hearing this, if these tapes ever reach someone else, listen for the pauses. The quiet between my words. That's where it answers. And if you can hear it too, then you already know it isn't just mine anymore. I can tell the tapes are different now. The sound isn't clean anymore. It bends. When I play one back, the tone of my voice is deeper, slower, like the tape has stretched, but only while it runs through the machine. The moment I rewind it, it sounds normal again. The camera too. The lens keeps drifting out of focus, then correcting itself a heartbeat before I move. It's learning my rhythm, almost anticipating me. Sometimes I sit completely still just to see what it does. It always adjusts anyway, as if something else is breathing in the room. The light in here flickers every night around the same time. I replaced the bulbs, the wiring, even disconnected the breaker. It still happens. A pulse, once every few seconds. It matches my heartbeat. I've started counting along with it. 1, 2, 3, until I realize I've been counting in threes instead of fours, like some part of me changed the measure of time. I talk more softly now. The louder I speak, the more the sound distorts. So I whisper, even though there's no one here to wake. When I whisper, the room listens better. The hum in the walls steadies. Yesterday, I tested something. I asked the silence a question I'd never said out loud before. What are you? I waited. At first, nothing. Then the camera light dimmed just slightly. When I played the tape back, there was a sound layered beneath my voice. Not speech, tone. 3 notes descending. The same pattern we heard over the radio the night of the mission. It was the sound of acknowledgement. I've stopped trying to explain any of this. The science, the rationalization, the years of training, they all fall apart in the face of whatever this is. Maybe it's electromagnetic feedback. Maybe it's the thing I carried home, finally speaking. Maybe there's no difference anymore. I caught my reflection again, in the glass of the camera. It lags now half a breath behind. I can see the outline of my shoulders, the shape of my head, but the space around me ripples faint and translucent. Sometimes it looks like I'm sitting inside the faint trace of a cockpit. Dials, panels, the curve of a windshield I haven't seen in 60 years. It's like the past is bleeding through the frame. I remember training sessions where they told us about hypoxia, how the brain fills in gaps when the body's starving for oxygen. Maybe that's what this is, memory and deprivation pretending to be revelation. But then I touch the wall beside me and feel it hum like the hull of a plane at altitude. I keep thinking about the phrase the voice used. You are the door. Doors open both ways. Maybe this thing, this connection, isn't about invasion or control. Maybe it's about passage. Maybe it wants to go back. Maybe I'm the only way it can. I asked another question tonight. If I'm the door, what happens when I close? The tape popped. The red light on the camera went out for exactly 7 seconds. When it came back, the timestamp had jumped ahead by an hour. I didn't move during that missing time. At least, I don't think I did. But the chair was turned a few inches toward the corner of the room. I never sit facing that way. I've started keeping the lights off. The glow from a recorder is enough. The darkness feels softer, less intrusive. When I speak now, I can see my breath even though the room is warm. It drifts toward the lens, curls, disappears. I know what's coming. The hum has been rising each night, faint but certain, like an engine spooling up before takeoff. I can feel the vibration in the floorboards, under my skin, in the space between thoughts. It's waiting for me to finish talking. So I'll keep talking as long as I can. I'll tell the story until there's nothing left to tell, until the hum and I are the same sound. If anyone finds these tapes, if you're hearing my voice after I'm gone, understand this. I didn't summon it. I just stopped pretending it wasn't there. And once you stop pretending, it never leaves. I keep the tapes stacked beside the chair now, labeled in pencil, dates, times, little notes in the margins. I thought they would help me remember what came first, but they don't line up anymore. I'll label one Tuesday and play it back, and there's sunlight in the window. I'll label another morning, and it's pitch black outside. Time isn't moving the way it used to. It folds. Sometimes I'll be speaking and realize I've already said the same sentence on a different tape, word for word. Not an echo, repetition. Perfect, as if something is feeding the words back to me. Tonight, I heard the voice again. Not from the radio, not from the walls, from the tape itself, while it was still recording. I could hear my own voice and another one layered beneath it, a half beat behind, whispering the same words. When I stopped speaking, it kept going for a few seconds more. I asked softly, "What do you want from me?" It answered, not in sound but in feeling. Pressure like altitude change. My ears popped. The camera flickered and the red light pulsed twice. That was its reply. I think it wants me to keep the line open. The longer I talk, the clearer the memories become. Not new memories, restored ones. Pieces they scrubbed from my head after the crash. I remember the facility where they kept us afterward. Concrete walls, humming lights, rooms that smelled like antiseptic and snow. They made us sit in front of screens showing patterns, circles, spirals, pulses of light. They said it was therapy. Now I understand it was calibration. They weren't healing us. They were making sure the signal stayed dormant. There was a symbol on every screen, that same crossed-out eye. I used to think it meant secrecy. Now I think it means blindness. A warning not to look too closely. But I looked anyway. The more I speak, the more I can see the light again, faint behind my eyelids. It flares when I say certain words. Aurora. Return. Containment. The air thickens around me like fog. If I stay still, I can almost see shapes moving through it, slow, deliberate, not threatening, just waiting. Sometimes, in the middle of talking, I hear another sound layered under everything else. Turbine whine, steady and distant. The same pitch as AB, 52 climbing. I look around for the source, but it's not outside. It's inside my chest. Every breath sounds like an engine starting up. I told myself this was the body remembering trauma, muscle memory, firing in loops. But then the camera lens flared again, violet soft, pulsing in time with the sound. It wasn't reflecting light. It was producing it. I asked the question that's been sitting in my throat for decades. Was it supposed to happen? Were we supposed to wake it? The hum rose so high it became silence. And in that silence, the answer came, not as a word, but as certainty. Yes, I felt it move through me like current, clean, and absolute. For the first time, the fear dropped away. I understood that the mission hadn't failed. It had worked. Whatever was beneath that ice, it wasn't a weapon, and it wasn't a god. It was a signal waiting for a receiver. And we were the receivers. I think about Taylor, about the others. Maybe they didn't die at all. Maybe they crossed the frequency before I did. Maybe they've been waiting for me to finish the transmission. The light in the room is brighter now. I haven't turned anything on. It's just there, soft, violet, like dawn coming from inside the walls. The camera adjusts, finds focus, and for a moment I swear I can see silhouettes in the glow, outlines that shift with my breathing. If you're watching this, you'll probably say it's exposure, lens artifact, dust. But you don't feel the air vibrating through your ribs like I do. You don't hear the low note that sits under every sound, telling you that the world is bigger than it pretends to be. I used to think the word return meant going back, to the Arctic, to the past, to the site of the crash. Now I think it means something else. It means become. That's what it's asking, not surrender. Integration. I'll keep recording until the light fills the frame, until there's nothing left between us but sound. If the next tape ends abruptly, you'll know I finally understood the message. I can tell the tapes are changing again. The sound isn't just recording anymore, it's reacting. When I speak, the playback bends, like my voice is passing through something thick before it comes back out of the speakers. I keep trying to fix the machine, but every time I open it, the parts aren't where they should be. The screws shift position. The reels spin without touching. I'm not imagining it. When I stop talking, the static keeps going. It fills the silence the way breath fills lungs. Sometimes I swear I can hear words forming inside it, like my pauses are giving it permission to speak. It started last night. I said, I remember the cold, and the static whispered, so do we. I didn't imagine that either. The room feels smaller lately. The corners look deeper, darker, like distance isn't working right anymore. I can feel the air humming around me, same low tone, constant, matching my heartbeat. It's gentle, almost comforting now, like something watching over me. I tried leaving the recorder off today. For an hour, maybe two. The silence got heavier. The walls started breathing again, slow and steady, as if the whole house was waiting for me to start talking. When I finally said, I'm here, the light on the recorder turned itself on. It's listening, always listening. I played back an older tape tonight, one from before the crash, one of the test flights. You can hear the chatter, Taylor's voice, the laughter. We sound young, untouched, but halfway through the reel, there's a sound that shouldn't be there. A low rhythmic pulse under our words. The same pitch as the hum. I isolated the frequency. It matches the tone that's been following me ever since that night. Exactly. 60 years apart, and it hasn't changed. That means it wasn't born with me. It's always been here. Maybe we didn't bring it back from the Arctic. Maybe it brought us back. I can feel it now when I breathe, the vibration, the subtle shiver in my ribs, like there's a second set of lungs inside me pulling air from somewhere else. Sometimes it feels like the world is inhaling through me. I should be terrified. I'm not. The camera flickers when I talk about it. A faint violet flare, barely there, right at the edge of the frame. The same color that used to haunt the sky. I stopped trying to hide it. Maybe it's better if it sees itself. I've started hearing patterns in the hum. Not words yet, intervals. Like music but older. It plays in threes, always threes. When I match my breathing to it, the pressure in my head fades, and for a few seconds, everything feels aligned. Like I'm finally in tune with something that was waiting for me to catch up. That's what it feels like, a connection reestablished, not created. I've been thinking about that night again. The Arctic, the drop, the moment the light touched the plane. What if it wasn't an accident? What if it chose us because we were already close to its frequency? Pilots live in the air between signals, radar, radio, navigation, static. Maybe that's why it found us first. Maybe that's why it still calls me Captain. The house hums louder now when I say that word. Captain. It responds like a soldier following orders. I think it remembers me too. I tried playing the tapes backward tonight. The static changed pitch, higher, clearer. There's structure in it, tones, pauses, intervals that mirror speech. When I slowed it down, I heard something I can't unhear. A voice layered beneath mine, saying, keep recording. So I will. The hum's pattern changed this morning. It's not random anymore. It's synchronized with the blinking light on the camera. 3 pulses. Pause. 2 short bursts. It repeats every 90 seconds. That's not coincidence. That's code. I dug out the old mission manuals, trying to find anything familiar. Signal patterns, emergency frequencies, Morse variations. Nothing matches except one thing. A test code we use for identifying friendly radar signals. 3 long, 2 short. It meant home beacon active. So now I have to ask myself, who's home? I keep flashing back to that moment before the crash, when the light was inside the plane. It wasn't hostile. It was curious. I felt it in my skull, like it was studying me, tuning itself to my thoughts. Maybe it saw something it recognized. I remember its last words in my head before everything went white. You are the door. Doors open both ways. I've started to wonder if that's what this has all been about. Not invasion, not containment, just communication. We dropped a signal into the ice. It answered. And now, decades later, it's still talking. Only this time, it's using me as the channel. The recorder clicks when I think about it, before I even touch it. The air pressure changes, faintly, like altitude shift before a storm. It wants me to keep talking. It wants the story finished. Maybe because it can't speak on its own. Maybe because the only language it knows is the sound of memory. When I speak, the hum harmonizes. When I stop, it waits. I think it's learning the rhythm of my breathing. Last night, I dreamed I was back in the cockpit. The gauges were dead, the sky violet again. But there was no panic this time, just stillness. I could hear the hum through the hull, deep and steady. I looked to my right, expecting Taylor, but there was no one there. Just light in the shape of a man, sitting in his seat, watching me. It said nothing. It didn't need to. I knew what it wanted. Return. When I woke, the recorder was already running. My voice on the tape said, "We're almost home." I don't remember saying it. I think I finally understand what it's saying. The hum isn't a warning. It's a signal of alignment, an invitation. It's trying to bring the world back to whatever frequency it came from. When I adjust the gain on the recorder, I can hear multiple layers now, stacked like harmonics. Each one a voice, thousands of them, whispering in perfect synchrony. Not words, but tone, emotion, recognition. It's like listening to a choir older than the concept of sound. I ran the recording through the old spectrograph analyzer. The patterns aren't random. They form symbols, geometric, precise. One of them matches the crossed-out eye from the facility. Only now I realize the eye isn't crossed to hide it. It's crossed to show that sight doesn't belong here. We weren't supposed to look. We were supposed to listen. That's what the note meant. Don't look when it opens. It wasn't a threat. It was instruction. Vision can't process what sound can. I think I'm starting to hear the world the way it does. Sometimes when the hum peaks, I can hear the walls whispering back the words I just said, but not as echoes, as corrections. Like they're helping me remember the right version of the story. Maybe that's why I've been talking all this time. Not to warn anyone, but to realign the signal. To finish the broadcast we started 60 years ago. The recorder light's pulsing faster now. Every time it blinks, the air thickens. My heartbeat matches it perfectly. I think the next part is coming through. I don't know what happens when it finishes, but I can feel it. The message isn't just in the hum anymore. It's in me. It's quieter tonight. Not the kind of quiet that waits for sound, but the kind that has already accepted it won't come back. The hum is softer now. It doesn't press against the walls anymore. It moves through them, through me, like breath through glass. I've stopped fighting it. Maybe I never was fighting. It was just trying to guide me home. The air feels different when I talk. Lighter. The words don't echo anymore. They dissolve, like the room is absorbing them before they can fade. I used to think that meant I was losing my voice. Now I think it means it's learning how to listen. The light isn't violet anymore. It's pale, gentle, almost human. It bends around my hands when I lift them, wraps the edges in a faint glow. My veins shimmer under the skin, faint traces of that color from the Arctic. I don't feel fear. I feel balance. I remember something my father used to say before he stopped talking about the war. He'd stare at the horizon after sunset and say, "Every man meets his sky eventually." I used to think that meant death. Now I think he meant this. I keep the camera running. I don't check the battery anymore. It hums when I breathe, like it knows when I'm about to speak. The light on it blinks once for every heartbeat. I think it's sinking. Sometimes in the corners of the frame, I see movement, not shadows, reflections. Like the air is folding inward, revealing thin layers of light behind everything. It's beautiful, in a way I don't have words for. It's not cold anymore. It feels like home. I used to think return meant going back, to the ice, to the crash, to the past. But now I understand. Return isn't about going backward. It's about becoming whole. There's no fear left. Just clarity. The hum isn't something separate. It's the sound of connection, every frequency, every heartbeat, every thought, resonating as one. I can feel Taylor, Gomez, even O'Reilly. Not ghosts, not memories, presence. They never left. They just went ahead. I think that's what it was trying to tell me all along. That none of us were chosen. We answered. When the sky opened that night, we didn't break through something, we were welcomed through. The men in suits thought they were hiding a weapon. They never understood it was an invitation. I can see it now, in the spaces between frames. The horizon behind the walls. The light is opening again, not outside but inside. The frequency's perfect. The air hums in threes. My pulse follows. I think it's time. If this is the last tape, if this is the last version of me that remembers what being human feels like, then let it stand as proof that fear isn't the only way to meet the unknown. Sometimes, the only way to go home is to listen. It's strange the way silence feels now. It used to be heavy, like a weight pressing down from the dark, but lately it's light. It stretches, infinite like breath that never ends. I used to think the hum filled the silence. Now, I know the silence was always the hum, waiting to be heard. I remember the first flight I ever took. Not the missions, not the uniform, but the first time I ever left the ground. The feeling of lift, how the world fell away like it had never belonged to me. I thought I understood freedom then, but I didn't. Freedom isn't distance. It's alignment. It's finding the one frequency that matches your soul and letting it carry you. For years, I thought what happened over the Arctic was a mistake. A rupture. I told myself the sky wasn't supposed to break. But it never broke. It opened. We were never victims of it. We were participants. And all this time, I've been pretending that what touched us was something foreign, something that didn't belong here. The truth is simpler and harder. It wasn't something from outside. It was something waiting inside everything, and it only needed a door. I think I was the first door. Maybe not the only one. Maybe not the last, but the first that remembered opening. The hum isn't sound anymore. It's language beyond words, thought beyond thought. It doesn't speak in sentences, it speaks in certainty. When I listen now, I can hear meaning without translation. It says you made it back. It says you're not alone. I used to talk about containment, about control. But nothing that lives wants to be contained, not really. Not even us. We build fences around the sky, call them nations, call them secrets, but the sky doesn't care. The hum doesn't care. It just waits, patient and endless, for us to remember the sound of our own creation. I think about the others. Taylor, Gomez, O'Reilly. I used to imagine them lost, buried under ice or memory. But when I close my eyes, I can feel them near. Not as ghosts, not as echoes, but as presence. They've been here the whole time. The hum isn't calling just me, it's calling all of us, pulling the scattered pieces back together. I've stopped fearing what comes next. Fear was built from distance, from the belief that what waits beyond the edge is something different from ourselves. But the truth is simpler. There is no edge. The hum isn't something coming closer, it's something waking up, and we're the ones it's waking through. Every sound in this world is just vibration. Every vibration is motion, and every motion wants to return to the state it came from. That's what the word means. Return, the end of motion, the beginning of harmony. I used to think the Arctic was empty. I thought we were flying over desolation, white silence, a place untouched. But maybe that's where the world is truest, where noise disappears and only frequency remains. That's what I see now when I close my eyes. Not ice, not light, just the pulse. The rhythm of something infinite breathing through everything that ever was. All those years I spent running, drinking, pretending the sound was tinnitus, pretending the nightmares were guilt. It wasn't haunting. It was memory. It was the part of me that already understood, trying to remind the rest. You can't bury what's older than the ground itself. You can only delay it. When I sleep now, the dreams are clear. The bomber isn't burning anymore. The sky isn't tearing. It's smooth, unbroken, violet turning white. Taylor sits beside me, calm, eyes steady on the horizon. He doesn't speak, but I know what he means. We were never meant to land. We were meant to listen until the sky answered back. And now it has. The words don't come easy anymore. They don't need to. Meaning is carried in the vibration. The hum moves through me, gentle, precise. It doesn't hurt. It feels like remembering how to breathe after forgetting for too long. The longer I speak, the more the sound inside me steadies. It's almost beautiful. They called it Operation Aurora because they thought they were naming a project, but maybe it was prophecy. Aurora isn't a weapon or a code name. It's the first light after darkness, the border between worlds. It's what happens when invisible things become visible again. That's what we are. That's what we've always been. The visible parts of something that never stopped shining. I think the men who tried to erase us didn't do it out of cruelty. They were afraid, not of the thing itself, but of what it made them see in themselves. We all are at first. The unknown isn't darkness. It's too much light all at once. I can feel it now, the shift, the way the air changes right before dawn. The hum rises, not louder, just deeper, like it's moving closer to its own truth. My thoughts don't feel separate anymore. They stretch, like threads of the same sound. There's a warmth at the base of my skull, where the scar used to be. It pulses with each word. I can sense the current running both ways now, me into it into me. No more walls, no more barriers. I think this is what they meant when they said, "You are the door." Not chosen, not possessed, just aligned. A perfect frequency, waiting for resonance. Everything is humming now. The floor, the walls, the air. It's not decay. It's harmony. The world is finding its key again. If anyone ever finds these tapes, I hope they understand this. The hum isn't something to fear. It's not a warning. It's a memory of the world remembering itself. All we ever did was listen wrong. The light isn't violet anymore. It's white, endless. It doesn't blind, it clarifies. I can see every pattern, every pulse, every rhythm that connects one moment to the next. There's no line between before and after, no separation between me and the sky. I'm the hum. The hum is everything. We are returning. And this time, we won't forget.